Welcome back. In the previous video, we took a look at the syntax, the commands to implement and verify dynamic ARP inspection, and it's now time to put those commands to work. Let's take a look at our diagram, and then we'll go to the lab. So here's our plan. We're going to implement dynamic ARP inspection for VLAN 30 on this switch, and the command is IP ARP inspection VLAN 30. And to set this interface 3/3 as a trusted port, we'd use the command in interface config on the switch, IP ARP inspection trust. Then we can verify our work with the show IP ARP inspection for that VLAN. And as we jump into the CLI, I've got a question for you. I know that dynamic ARP inspection is going to check the ARP messages just to make sure that nobody's lying. Well, it has to know what the correct layer 3 and layer 2 combos are for each of the hosts. Do you recall where it's going to look to see whether or not the layer 3 and layer 2 information matches up? What is the other source of that information that it's going to pull from? Do you remember? And if you're saying, Keith, I think it was DHCP snooping. You are right. So the first thing we're going to do before we start configuring anything is we want to verify if DHCP snooping is enabled and see if there's any entries in the DHCP snooping binding so that ARP inspection has something to work with. That's really important. So let's take a look at that first. So here on the switch, let's do a show IP DHCP snooping, and we use the keyword binding and press enter. And sure enough, we've got 2 entries. We're concerned with VLAN 30, so it knows at least one here. This MAC address with this IP address is on port gig 0/1 in VLAN 30. So once we enable dynamic ARP inspection, it can use this entry here as a way to check to see whether or not the layer 3 and layer 2 information is correct for a device. We also should do a show IP ARP inspection for VLAN 30 just to make sure it's not yet configured. So that's a great starting point for us. It's not yet enabled. So let's enable it. We'll do a config T. And I've got a question for you. Let's go back to our topology for a moment. Should we make this a trusted interface first before we enable the feature for the VLAN? I'm thinking we should. Otherwise, we're going to get errors anytime R3 does ARP messages because R3 does not have a dynamically learned address. So it's not in the DHCP snooping binding table. So I would recommend we make this 3/3 interface trusted first, and then we enable the ARP inspection on VLAN 30. So we'll go to interface gig 3/3. And also, we should verify that we're on the right port. I mean, how do we know that interface gig 3/3 here on the switch connects out to R3? And one way of doing that would be a do show CDP neighbor. And that's going to verify it for us. So our local interface gig 3/3 does indeed go to R3. Fantastic. So here we'll do an IP ARP inspection question mark and trust and press enter. And then we'll enable ARP inspection for the VLAN with IP ARP inspection for VLAN and 30 and press enter. Then we'll type in end and we'll do a show IP ARP inspection for VLAN 30, press enter. And check this out. We got a lot of activity going on here. So we have a lot of denies going on here, and they're all coming in on gig 0/1. Look at the IP addresses. We have 10.1.0.111 and 10.1.0.120. Let's talk about why that's happening. And here's what's going on. Off of this one port, I've got some other devices on the 10.1 network. So although it's one broadcast domain down here, I've got different devices with thinking it's different subnets. So I've got some devices on 10.1.0 that are sending ARP messages, and they're working their way up to this port because they're broadcast based. And the switch is saying, nope, I don't have any information in the DHCP snooping table that says this specific IP address of .111 or whatever it was. And because I can't verify it, because I don't know, I'm going to drop you. And that's what those messages are. So what we've done is we've applied ARP inspection for VLAN 30. We made 3.3 a trusted port. We also did a show command to verify that it's configured. But now our challenge is we've got some ARP messages from other devices off of this port down here that are being denied on this switch port. And that provides a perfect segue for the next video, because in the next video and lab, what we're going to do is we're going to take devices that are not being learned via DHCP snooping and create static entries that basically tell the switch, you know what, this IP address and this layer 2 address, they match up. Go ahead and use it, even if it's not in the DHCP snooping table. And as a result, by looking at that list and saying, oh, yep, these match, the dynamic ARP inspection can check on ARP messages even though they haven't been learned via DHCP snooping. So we'll do that with a ARP ACL in the very next video. So I'll see you there in just a moment. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.